and another ship firing at it, and the incoming ship turning away from the Earth. One answer to the UFO contact problem might be that this particular race of aliens have claimed Earth for itself. That would explain why there is a universe with many types of aliens, but the ones that control Earth are keeping them out, and keep humans from believing or readily addressing the alien topic. This matches the Prism Planet theory. Jacobs finishes the section on secrecy this way, quote, "Because it is covert, the abduction phenomena that is essential to the breeding program has grown to enormous proportions, and both its purpose and its magnitude have profoundly disturbing implications for the future." Jacobs talks numbers. In 1987, I also began to collect incidence data on abductees. I developed a simple survey based on the Omni questionnaire for a university student population. Over the years, I refined the survey and continued to give it to students. By 1991, I had collected over 1,200 responses, mainly from college students aged 18 to 23. These fell into three categories: possible abductee, questionable, and non-abductee. I based the categories on my knowledge of the unusual experiences that abductees had told me about before they knew they were involved with the phenomenon. The results of my analysis suggest that 5.5% of the respondents were possible abductees and that 15.5% were questionable. These numbers are shockingly high. Jacobs continues, and there are many other informal estimates. For example, the evidence strongly suggests that the majority, if not all, of close encounter UFO sightings are the beginnings or endings of abduction events. Even high-level sightings may be indicative of abductions. Statistics from Gallup polls on UFO sightings have varied from 9% to 14% since the 1950s. If a percentage of these sightings mask abductions, then the number of abduction events is high. Dr. Jacobs concludes about the Roper poll he conducted with Bud Hopkins, quote, "The final analysis indicates that 2% of the American people, 5 million Americans, have experienced events consistent with those that abductees experienced before they knew they were abductees. Even if this number is as much as 75% higher than actual occurrence, there would still be over 1 million people who might be abductees. One thing is clear, the Roper poll confirmed the less formal and anecdotal evidence that there are tremendous numbers of people who have had abduction experiences, and we can conclude, therefore, that the abduction phenomena is widespread and touches almost all groups in society. The conclusion from the Roper poll and from our own research is that, without a doubt, an enormous number of people are experiencing an enormous number of abductions. The aliens have invested and continue to invest a tremendous amount of time and energy in the abduction program. Many people think that abductions are a study or experiment, or that the aliens are learning about us. The numbers suggest otherwise. The learning and experimenting, if ever the case, are mainly over. Hence, the evidence clearly indicates that the aliens are conducting a widespread, systematic program of physiological exploitation of human beings. Jacob says, although it is unknown precisely how many stages of hybrid development exist, the evidence points inexorably to the development of an increasingly human-looking and human-behaving hybrid armed with the aliens' ability to manipulate humans. When fetuses are removed from abductees, they are kept in tanks filled with liquid nutrients. Abductees have reported rooms, some small and some almost cavernous, containing hundreds and even thousands of tanks with gestating fetuses, their large, open black eyes dominating their tiny bodies. Jacobs goes on to say, if hybrids are continually gaining human genes, and thus becoming more human, and if they can exist in human society unnoticed for short periods, then it is possible that in the future they will be able to do so for long periods of time, or even indefinitely. The implications of this for the future are, at the very least, disturbing." End quote. One abductee and proponent of the positive view of aliens states, quote, "The ETs, too, realize that there's a supreme being or a supreme source of everything. They're not kidded that they are the top of the pile either. They acknowledge a supreme source out there, the fountainhead of all life." So this is another confirmation of what I have heard from many sources about most aliens, that they in fact do believe there is a God that created everything, but they do not make the connection with the Christian Bible. It makes sense that as smart as they are, their science would have figured out the appearance of intelligent design to the universe, but their intelligence apparently does not extend to belief in the Scripture. That is, aliens, to my knowledge, are not Christians. Next, Jacobs very well describes the positives in the abduction research field, which positives, by the way, I heard David Icke use that term, positives, as people who are always positive about what they are finding of the situation and never really discussing or getting too deep into the negative aspect of it. Who, along with many outspoken abductees themselves, conclude that the aliens are benevolent and spiritually more highly evolved than humans. Thus, we should see them as teachers or elders. What follows here is another quote from his book talking about some of those positive view type researchers. Jacob says, quote, "Moreover, some positives aggressively try to discredit researchers who are not in their camp. John Hunter Gray has called abduction researchers who adopt a skeptical or even neutral stance gloom and doomers, and he treats them scornfully. He accuses the gloom and doom researchers of being either downright paranoid, motivated by commercial considerations, or ideologically endeavoring to resurrect a new version of the Red Scare. Similarly, positive Richard Boylan has suggested that mainstream abduction researchers are working together with a self-serving government elite and CIA operatives to prevent the real truth about alien intentions from coming out." So there's a whole group of researchers saying that those that are negative about it are actually with the government trying to suppress information. Of course, that makes sense that there would be back and forth accusations on both sides. He goes on to say, "The gloom and doomers have made the aliens' plans all the more difficult to carry out because they play on people's fears. Both Boylan and Mack de-emphasize the effect of the standard abduction procedures," and Mack, as you recall, was one of the researchers that I pointed out in the beginning as one of the ones that I looked at. And his debate with Bud Hopkins, I felt that he just didn't address the negative issue clearly enough. Boylan believes that gynecological and urological procedures take place only with a very small number of abductees, and he rarely focuses on them. And although Mack has found nearly the full range of alien physical, mental, and reproductive procedures, he only mentions them in passing while emphasizing what he finds to be the spiritually uplifting elements. See, this is why I didn't trust him. That's what I found. Joe Nyman believes that investigators who find that abductees were victimized have been influenced by popular media, which have publicized abductees who have been victimized. For Nyman, these investigators have prejudiced the phenomena, and their abduction work is superficial and incomplete. The benevolent spin that the positives, both abductees and researchers, put on the abduction phenomena is puzzling, given the way most people describe their abductions: being unwillingly taken, being subjected to painful physical procedures, sometimes leaving permanent scars, enduring humiliation and abusive sexual episodes, including unwanted sexual intercourse, living with the fear and anxiety of wondering when they will be abducted again. That's Jacobs continuing on there. And I say about this confirms my personal findings that the researchers I do not trust are Jacques Vallée, John Mack, Mary Wadwell, and Barbara Lamb, who seem to have skewed or non-fact-based research as their base of information. But I can now, with my trust in Dr. David Jacobs, add to that list of people I would not trust Joe Nyman, Richard Boylan, and John Hunter Gray, none of whom I have seen or researched their work. Dr. Jacobs goes on to describe the charlatan UFO contact group, seemingly headed by George Adamski, which is a good description of shenanigans surrounding this entire UFO alien subject. It is no surprise, given human nature, that many people with religion, ghosts, or other items where the proof is intangible, that people would take advantage of it to make money. Jacobs goes on to say, quote, "At first potentially reasonable, before long the contactee stories become increasingly fanciful. The Space Brothers gave them short rides in flying saucers. One went from Los Angeles to Kansas City. Howard Menger went to the moon. Eventually the contactees were flying to Mars, Venus, and the outer planets. Led by Professor, as in quotes, George Adamski, Daniel Fry, Orfeo Angelisi, Howard Menger, Truman Bethram, Buck Nelson, and others, the contactees proved to be a terrible embarrassment to legitimate UFO researchers of the period, who had to spend great amounts of time and money combating them and explain to a confused public that they were charlatans who did not represent the legitimate UFO witnesses." Jacobs goes on to say, "Although the contactees lost popularity in the 1960s, their legacy is still with us. Devoted followers of the teachings of George Adamski and other contactees still exist in the United States. The modern Swiss contactee Billy Meyer has published volumes of philosophical ruminations supposedly derived from aliens who come from the Pleiades constellation. Meyer has attracted a large worldwide following and supplied photos, film, and tapes of UFOs, all of dubious origin, in support of his contentions. Dr. Stephen Greer has formed an organization that will take a member to a secluded place and signal aliens to come to Earth for private sightings. Greer's claims suggest a special relationship with the extraterrestrials so that they will do his bidding." And Jacobs describes next how that an abductee trying to cope with their situation turn to New Age groups and others who take a positive view of the aliens. He says, "These abductees seek reassurance and find organizations and people who share their belief that the aliens are benevolent. Often they become involved with New Age groups that focus on the existence of alternative realities. The abductees learn there is more to life than one can know in one conscious, objective level. When they come in contact with the channeling of aliens or spirit aliens, they, quote, discover an explanation for their experiences. In channeling, the entity answers all questions, no matter how grand, esoteric, or trivial. And the channeled messages directly address the rationale behind the abduction experiences. The abductees have been chosen to undertake a mission to help humanity, Earth, the aliens, and the universe. Abductees are not victims. They are important players in a majestic alien plan for the betterment of humanity. Enduring a little fear and pain is a small price to pay for taking part in such an important task." And I say about this error in thinking about the abduction phenomena and all its implications is very important to getting at the truth. In fact, I would include that any study, as Jacobs includes here, a whole analysis on the characteristics of disinformation and its sources. People who do not want to know the truth, or who, like me, have a strong desire to explore space and have contact with aliens, might be confused or hesitate to accept a less pleasant reality regarding it, which, while coincidence or simple human need to feel positive, nonetheless provably clouds the actuality of what is happening. We do know that human emotion is an obstacle to reality. As I see it, there appears to be two main fronts in which disinformation regarding alien abduction and hybridization takes form. The first is the concept that the aliens themselves are benevolent and higher spiritually evolved, and what they are doing is good. And the second involves disintegration of reality itself, such as Jacques Vallée introducing the idea that the aliens are a manifestation of human consciousness. In other words, our collective desire created the aliens. As in a court case, all it may take is causing of a doubt to cause a pause in action that might otherwise be taken by those who see the reality. For example, the aliens, perhaps the reptilians along with Satan, who seem to know when the big events like 9/11 will take place, might be aware of or have planned another such event which they have a plan in place to take advantage of. This is a classic strategy many people aware of these dark agendas understand as being standard. The confusion or argument by positives that the aliens are enlightened space brothers could pause any popular uprising long enough to make it to that cataclysmic event. And when that event occurs, there will be so much focus on that, it will be impossible for human action against them. People may be so stressed out and alarmed by, say, a giant earthquake, that focus on a congressional probe into alien abduction would seem frivolous by comparison. Furthermore, if there was not a growing majority of researchers who finds that the ETs are highly benevolent, as the opening to Barbara Lamb's book states, there would not be a platform of voices to discredit people like David Jacobs, Carla Turner, and Bud Hopkins, portraying the ETs and their agenda as clearly evil. Every tool in Satan's arsenal will be used, such as the classic guilt trip tactic, which the aliens are reported widely to use. You can imagine the positives putting forth drawings of children saying that opposing reporters on this subject would be condemning all these wonderful children that only want a chance. You can see how unloving it is to make them and their creators out to be evil, casting their young lives as evil. Dr. David Jacobs goes on to say, to circumvent the problems of being taken against their will, living in fear, and being unable to say no, the New Age abductees believe they have given the aliens permission to abduct them, either in a past life or when they were small children. They entered into a verbal contract and, therefore, it is proper and even legal for the aliens to abduct them. For New Age positives, the aliens are humanity's friends. Godlike, they have come from the heavens to help us find our way. Not only do they have superior technology, but their moral sense, desire for peace, spirituality, and ability to love are all far more advanced than ours. Being a part of their cosmic vision is a privilege and an honor." End quote. So that's Jacobs talking about the positives and the abductee positives. Again, could the permission be the default of not giving your soul to God through Jesus? But let us say the truth is that these people have in some way given their consent. What explanation of goodness can be assigned to having to forget they gave permission, so that in fact, as the numbers say, the majority of abductees have no idea what is going on and live in fear of abductions? A thought occurred to me about this, as I believe I found the identity of the insectoid aliens in Scripture as scorpions. See Luke 10:19 and Revelation 9:3. Could this be like the locusts described in Revelations, which are given to torment those who have the mark of the beast? And here is Revelations 9:3 reads, "And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months, and their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man." Notice that these locusts cannot be the scorpions themselves, because they are likened to them in Revelation 9:3 as the scorpions of the earth. Not the scorpions of the earth, as the scorpions of the earth. However, I may be wrong about that. That may be a language situation, and this is actually talking about them. But my sense so far is that the Luke 10:19 serpents and scorpions, as being all the power of the enemy, refers to the reptilian and insectoid aliens. Therefore, we might understand that the Mantis aliens described by Simon Parkes and others are scripturally scorpions of the earth, which would support the common belief that they are not from another planet, but another dimension. Notice that the locusts come up from the smoke of the bottomless pit, which pit might refer to the fourth dimension or demonic realm. The locusts, however, are not mindless insects, but intelligent sentient beings, as the Mantis aliens clearly are, because of these passages telling us they have a king and even human features. Revelation 9:7 reads, "And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were, as it were, crowns of gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. And they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth was as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots, of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue his name is Apollyon." So we see that these beings' bodies seem to be that of a 4-footed or non-erect humanoid body type, because it says the shape of them is like horses prepared for battle. Further interesting, it says their faces were as the faces of men, which might correlate to the hybrids, who, while yet being beasts, have the appearance of being human, i.e. the children with black eyes, or the tall grays, which might be a mix of human and insectoid DNA. They characteristically have long hair, which may be blonde, i.e. the Nordic type aliens, because it says they have a crown of gold. I previously found a correlation to the word crown or crown of gold as meaning blonde hair from this scripture, Psalm 21:3, "For thou preventest him with the blessings of goodness, thou settest a crown of pure gold on his head." The king in this case is actually the queen because of the matchup of elements in Psalm 45, telling us the king of Psalm 21 is actually the queen. Therefore, the crown of gold might be blonde hair on a woman, which perhaps is why it is so glorious, though men do not understand this deeper significance to it. While I have not broken all the code here, but only making a guess at supposedly matching elements, it may be that these locusts have long blonde hair, which might be the Nordic aliens. Notice that Dr. Jacobs postulates that the Nordics are yet another earlier result of the insectolin DNA manipulation. Notice that insectolin is the word that Dr. David Jacobs uses for the insectoid type aliens, or mantis aliens as they are more commonly known. The idea that these locusts have some semblance to men and are intelligent as opposed to regular insects as we know them comes from Revelation 9:11, which reads, "And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon." Which, if they have a king, it means they have intelligence to follow that king. The elements working against the sentient being idea, however, is the fact that they are told not to hurt the green grass or any living thing, but only those who don't have the seal of God, and the fact this torment continues for 5 months. This, of course, would be a differentiation from the Scorpion hybrid program, which from the available information appears to have been going on for at least 100 years, if not quite a bit longer. Dr. Jacobs says, "Feeling infused with knowledge may be related to the common belief among abductees that the aliens have physiologically altered them and their children. Beginning with the first generation of abductees, the aliens have continued to abduct their progeny, which indicates that the descendant abductees have certain desirable qualities." He goes on to say, "The social, political actives, a group the Roper organization included in the survey, answered positively in far greater numbers than other groups to all questions on the poll, indicating that there might be a larger number of abductees in this group. According to the Roper organization, these people are influential Americans. They are the trendsetters rather than the trend followers. They are wealthier and better educated than most Americans, and presumably above average in intelligence. If indeed there are more abductees in this group than in other groups in society, then there may be a subtle alteration taking place, which does not necessarily show up in individual abductees, but manifests in statistics for large groups. That could suggest that the aliens are somehow altering humans to facilitate their agenda. But at this point, there is not enough information to confirm that frightening thought. So the rumor that the aliens only abduct uneducated or less intelligent people living out in rural areas is shown to be wrong information, according to the Roper poll. To the contrary, abductees are more involved in society, more leaders and trendsetters, more intelligent, more educated, and wealthier. This information is a significant contributor to Dr. David Jacobs' overall conclusion that the goal of the insectolin hybridization program is planetary acquisition. I should expound more on this, but there is a personal feeling I have from my school days and the people I grew up with that matches the information that those people in the program are superior human beings. They are mentally sharper, less frivolous, more serious and goal-oriented. A snippet which is purely suggestive is that one day a teacher gave the assignment to the children to tell of a desire that they have. This is when I was in school. One child, upon observing there was a bowl of chocolate bars on the teacher's desk, said that her desire was to have a chocolate bar, and the tactic was successful as the teacher then gave her one, and no one else. Of course, I realized that this could just be a smart kid, but I observed these kind of heartless, goal-oriented kids in the high-end neighborhood I grew up, that is, Calabasas, California, which was quite different from the lower-end public schools I attended when I lived with my father in a different part of the city, that is, Van Nuys, California. The contrast was startling. In the higher-end neighborhood, I never had too many friends, and I always felt uncomfortable and hated school. When I was living in the poorer area of the city and attended school, there I had lots of friends, and while I would be quick to admit maybe it is because like intelligence attracts each other, in other words, I'm lower intelligence, I rather think it was because the kids were more friendly. The kids in the high-end area seemed like cold sharks to me. There is a vibe to these shark-like aggressive people I just don't like, which I feel is differentiated from intelligence level. A guess of mine is that many of these kids from the sterile high-end neighborhood I grew up in is that they are hybrids. It is not just DNA attributes that make them superior, but their spirit is of Satan, and as such they know inwardly, like him, they have but a short time because their spirit is of him, so their life is in him, and they know that it has a short period of time, as God's word tells us, and that's why he's so rushing, and they're so urgent, because they're trying to get the most out of life before they die. I think that's the point of it. This is in contrast from those in God's spirit who know they have all the time of eternity. So you see, we who have a belief in an inner knowledge of living forever, we're not in a rush, we're not in a hurry, because we know we have forever. They hate those whose spirit is of God, though they do not recognize this, in fact, seeing their hate as being toward criminal or otherwise undesirable elements of society. And this is a common feature that I notice, and many people have noticed this is very common, that what happens to people who are wicked and criminal is that they project. That's a classic psychological phenomenon. It's projecting that, and so what they do is they become the curators of righteousness, and therefore start looking at the people who are opposed to them as the unrighteous ones, trying to point out their unrighteousness, but in their unrighteousness they make up all this stuff, these lies, and so that's where you get these just tremendous continual lies. It's like they're pathological. They don't sit down and think like, let's make up a bunch of lies. They just do it as part of their nature to defend their own wicked existence. In fact, I think the poison vaccines may in fact be a push down of those who are not part of their elite Satan seed hybrids. So in case any of you have noticed this, the vaccines, I just instinctively knew not to get them because I knew that the world was evil. But now I realize that there's a lot more substance to these vaccine issues, and they're straight up poisoning us, and with who knows, with nanobots and other things that will destroy you rather quickly if you're not one of the Satan seeds hybrids with the antidote, and then maybe it won't phase you. But that's what I think that the vaccines are, is really, and maybe they even create the flu virus and the other things that really make you sick, to scare people into getting the vaccine so that everybody will get them, and it's your choice to get the vaccine or not. That's why you need God's indwelling spirit of truth to know and be able to resist these things, because otherwise everybody else is going to be sucked into these programs, and you make your choice to go ahead and do it. And that's how the demons operate. They get you to make your own choice to self-destruct. Continuing from Dr. David Jacobs' book, The Threat, and its conclusion section entitled The Alien Agenda, Dr. Jacobs says this, quote, "All the evidence seems to suggest that integration into human society is the aliens' ultimate goal, and all their efforts and activities appear to be geared toward complete control of the humans on Earth. Indeed, the abductees are already living with the burden of alien visitation and manipulation." End quote. I realize many people may see this as alarmist or overly negative about what is perhaps a more complex or mixed reality situation. After all, many people, such as those hybrids in Barbara Lamb's book, have a very positive view of the abduction and hybridization process. But if control of humans is one of their goals, what then is their end game? Could it be they do want to make a human world where everyone is happy, as the propaganda films they show abductees suggests? From the information Dr. David Jacobs provides here, it appears the insectoid plan is to replace all humans with hybrids eventually, and these new humans will not have individuality and memories as we know it, but will be hive-minded like the insectoids. They, in their own perspective, might see this as converting humans from continual wars and poverty or riches situation to a more fair and balanced society. Here are the 4 main goals Dr. Jacobs says he has determined of the aliens. 1. The abduction program. The aliens initially selected human victims around the world and instituted procedures to take these humans and their progeny from their environments without detection. 2. The breeding program. The aliens collect human sperm and eggs, genetically alter the fertilized embryo, incubate fetuses in human hosts, and make humans mentally and physically interact with the offspring for proper hybrid development. 3. The hybridization program. The aliens refine the hybrids by continual alteration and breeding with humans over the generations to become more human while retaining critical alien characteristics. Perhaps humans are also altered over time and acquire alien characteristics. 4. The integration program. The aliens prepare the abductees for future events. Eventually, the hybrids, or the aliens themselves, integrate into human society and assume control. And now further on in Jacobs' book, The Threat, one abductee named Howard puts it this way, quote, "It is disturbing that the aliens and hybrids seem primarily concerned with the Earth, not with human beings. They do not comment on the preservation of life or the value of humanity or human institutions. They say they want to make a better world, but they never talk about partnership with humans, peaceful coexistence, equality. Reshma Kamel was told that after the change there will be only one form of government. The insect-like aliens will be in complete control. There will be no necessity to continue national governments. There will be one system and one goal. I consider the possibility that our entertainment media depicting similarities to reality might actually, instead of warning us like we might think, actually serve to discredit reality by causing serious researchers to reject their findings because they look too much like media-derived confabulation. Look at this line from Dr. David Jacobs' comment in the What Can Be Done section of his book, The Threat. Quote, "It smacks so much of cultural fantasy and psychogenesis that the barriers to acceptance of its reality seem unsurmountable. Does it then make sense as a possible strategy of the aliens if entertainment media or even known mental disorder manifestations mirror reality too closely for people to then accept the findings of researchers and thereby the truth is blocked?" So in other words, entertainment being used to actually mirror reality for the purpose of discrediting it from the subject because it gets too close to what you saw in a movie, and therefore it must be confabulation based on media. Jacob says, "As much as I want to be optimistic, I find little to fuel hope for the future. In a way, I wish I could be like the positive researchers, existing in a naive but happy dreamland, awaiting the coming of the benevolent ones who will engulf us all in love and protection. The positives' beliefs, shrouded in their own form of spirituality, must be guided by a utopian future that is lacking in mine." So you see what Jacobs is saying there is that there has to be a utopian vision to go along with the alien abduction and all of the negative stuff that's going with it, because there has to be a backstory to this, and that's exactly what I came to in reading Barbara Lamb's book, is that there's these common elements that are given to these people, that each of these hybrids talked about their life's experience, and their experience with the aliens being that they are telling them that there is this ascension to the fifth dimension, there is a spiritual growth and enlightenment. Only some of the people on earth are going to ascend because they are of a higher vibration of love and caring for other animals and stuff like that. But in reality, it looked to me like a BS story. It's essentially a story that they're feeding them to give them a positive view, and that this is all intentional to distract from their real purpose, which is planetary acquisition. I think Dr. Jacobs has it correct. Jacobs goes on to say, "The challenge of understanding UFO sightings that occupied so much of my time and attention when I first began my research is now a distant memory. Then I treated the phenomenon as a giant puzzle, not realizing that the completed picture would be far more distressing than the optimism and excitement I felt in the act of putting it together. As the pieces fell into place, an unease began to take hold of me. I realized early on that the UFO phenomenon was the only physical occurrence that we have ever encountered that actively dictates the terms upon which it could be studied." It's an important point. "I did not understand that our inability to study the phenomenon was part of a calculated program to hide its activities and purpose." So that right there is an amazing and critically important statement by Dr. Jacobs. Jacobs finishes The Threat saying thus, "Through competent research, many of the abduction phenomenon's challenges have been met, many of its mysteries solved, and one of its aspects has emerged with crystal clarity. The aliens have fooled us. They lulled us into an attitude of disbelief, and hence complacency, at the very beginning of our awareness of their presence. Thus, we were unable to understand the dimensions of the threat they pose and act to intervene. Now it may be too late. My own complacency is long gone, replaced by a sense of profound apprehension and even dread. We know what their behavior means, and now it is imperative to ask what the consequences of that behavior will be for future generations of human society. Perhaps the answer to that question will not be found until they have completed their agenda, but I do not think that we will have to wait very long." He goes on, "It has taken us more than 50 years, but we have finally learned why the UFOs are here. We now know the alarming dimensions of the alien agenda and its goals. I could never have imagined it would turn out this way. I desperately wish it were not true. I do not think about the future with much hope. When I was a child, I had a future with much hope. When I was a child, I had a future to look forward to. Now I fear for the future of my own children." End quote. And my conclusion upon reading Dr. David Jacobs' book, The Threat. I want to offer a heartfelt thanks and a nod of admiration to Dr. Jacobs for an amazing and thorough work. This book is a must-read for what is going on with our planet and these insectoid aliens. Given the unstable nature of hypnotic regression, the information he was able to acquire and compile for this report is simply astounding. I was convinced of the veracity of his report based on the clear sense he gave to describing the problems of regression and his procedure for comparative error elimination. His in-depth description of all problems facing the researcher, from erroneous fellow researchers and charlatans to wishful thinking and lying aliens, gives me the trust I need in a topic fraught with perils of misinformation and disinformation. If the information were not so dark and scary, Dr. Jacobs would surely be a lot more popular and well known outside the so-called UFO community. I can personally attest to the lack of popular support for the presentation of truth, which the truth of this world is dark, scary, and highly unpleasant, especially for those in the happy illusion apart from that truth. Dr. Jacobs manages to get to the bottom of at least one major aspect of the UFO phenomena that no one else has, and present it in a credible report that people with common sense can readily see. I like his courage and even humor amongst this dark news his life's career has brought forth, and I saw no sign in his writing or watching him speak of being a depressed or paranoid thinker. Dr. Jacobs, faced with expulsion from the university he taught at as a result of his work, had to fight for his career, which is no surprise given what has been clearly documented of those uncovering the truth. In other words, we get hit from all sides by the enemy. Further, he was threatened by the aliens themselves, but has not backed down. He continues to give interviews and lectures, closing with his trademark, "That's my story, and I'm sticking to it." I therefore thank you, Dr. Jacobs, for your brilliant and utterly necessary work. In the next section, I get into some theories about how art and media may be telling us something about the alien abduction phenomena. What is alien abduction? Part 3, The Media Connection. I happen to believe there is a tie-in between entertainment media and reality that becomes particularly interesting when it deals with elements we do not have ready access to, such as aliens. Naturally, any fact supposedly derived from such media is highly suspect on a number of fronts and should be included in our thinking only as vehicles for speculation. These speculations, however, might be useful platforms in putting together a useful picture of what we're facing. I am a lifelong fan of science fiction, including science fiction horror, and two of my favorite titles were the motion pictures Aliens, 1986, directed by James Cameron, and The Thing, 1982, directed by John Carpenter. In my opinion, as of this date, that is 2016, John Carpenter's The Thing represents the greatest achievement in science fiction horror, with James Cameron's Aliens a close second. Ironically, I believe these two favorites of mine have a deep connection to the reality of what is behind the alien abduction phenomena. I always felt there might be some connection these movies had to reality, but I never dared to guess how real it turns out this connection is. It is fascinating how, at this later time in my life, and this investigation into alien abduction, to realize those feelings were justified. I can remember distinctly sitting in the movie theater watching Aliens and being inundated with fear. When my friend and I walked out to the car afterwards, I remember being jumpy and looking around me and my friend mocking me. When I saw John Carpenter's The Thing, even though I was sitting next to my dad, I was so scared I got up and ran out of the theater. Then I crept back in and sat down on the floor in the back of the theater. For months after seeing the movie, I was terrified of The Thing being behind corners or under my bed. For all these years since I saw that movie, I continued to have nightmares about it. In the dreams, I would realize at some point that the Thing was present, and terror would follow as I sought to escape the situation. I will still have a dream occasionally that wanders into the Thing territory. A description of the movie Aliens is as follows. A space cargo ship discovers an extremely hostile life form that impregnates its victims through the mouth via a giant spider which leaps out of an egg if someone gets too close to it. While the spider is helplessly wrapped around the victim's head, it impregnates the person through the mouth with an alien embryo. Soon the embryo explodes from the stomach of the impregnated person, scurries away, then grows into a large, black, bipedal alien with an exoskeletal body, which you can see its bones like the individual ribs and vertebrae in the tail. It has an elongated head, and interestingly, the mouth and front of its skull look somewhat human. The body is black and slender, with what looks like a biological form of hydraulics giving it enormous strength. The human-like teeth has a domed forehead above them with no eyes, giving it a very creepy look, as though it does not rely on sight, but is fully capable in the dark. In fact, most of the scenes with the alien take place in the dark, and suspense is created by a person trying to survive where he cannot see what is hiding in every dark crevice. Along with super strength and speed, the alien seems to have intuitive powers which allow it to always sneak up on its hapless victim, and there is a sense of inevitable doom because of its supernatural wit. There was one alien movie where the alien was identified as a serpent, but that makes no sense, as H.R. Geiger, the artist who created the concept for the alien, never depicted it with reptilian features whatsoever. The black, somewhat slimy exoskeletal body looks insectoid, as well as the elongated head and pipe-shaped protrusions on its back. The alien has a deadly proboscis, a mini-mouth inside its larger mouth, which is always dripping with saliva, perhaps tapping into deep ancestral fear of being eaten. The alien, however, does not eat its victims. Rather, it kills or drags the body back to the nest to be a host for one of the spider eggs. This behavior is clearly reminiscent of insectoids or arachnids. Also, the aliens build elaborate nests with resin they create somehow, which is closer to insectoid than any other life form. In this concept painting Geiger made for the alien, you can see a large, black, slanted, elliptical-shaped eye, which reminds of an insect and matches the described appearance of several gray-type aliens. Notice the human-looking jaw and mouth, as though Geiger's vision of this creature was that it is descended from or partially human in some way. There is an interesting title here, Paradise Lost, which has a biblical tie-in and leaves the impression this creature might be from some bleak dystopian future where humans are integrated into some kind of biowarfare genetic alteration. In fact, that was the initial impression I had about the alien, that it was created as a biowarfare soldier with both sentient and animal capabilities, making it superior to any soldier that is simply one or the other. I wonder if this title Paradise Lost refers to the fall of man at the Garden of Eden, and now things in this dark universe have progressed to this point.